Hello, everybody. I'm Sora from Hello Tomorrow, and I'll be hosting the third episode of Becoming Deep Tech Savvy, a corporate journey today. In this series, we talk about how translational science, and particularly deep tech, is helping transform corporations. The compact session today will be divided into three parts: a 7-minute presentation from our speaker, followed by a 20-minute discussion, followed by a 10 minutes Q&A from the audience. The subject of today's episode is navigating the risk of corporate innovation. Corporate innovation, as such, is a subject that has been talked about way too much. This is why today we have a speaker with us who has put his strategy to action successfully and managed to bring a true, actionable corporate transformation. In this spirit, I'm extremely happy to host Nick de Blasio, Program Manager, Concept Development Acceleration at Nestlé. He is also the co founder of Ingenius at Nestlé, the employee innovation program and platform. Over to you, Nick.
That's Rob. Thank you for the introduction. Nice to meet you, everyone. So let's see. I've got a couple of slides beginning to walk through. Okay, see that? Okay. All right. So, and you may see, okay, we've got generation regeneration. I always like to promote this everywhere. And we're presenting something externally as well. So it's a new internal emphasis that we have from Nestlé in going beyond sustainability into renew and restore the environment. So for me, this is something that's really key to my heart. And you'll see actually in terms of on the Ingenius side, how we have actually grown significantly in the last year as our programs around net zero as well, and sustainability is something that's becoming a lot more prominent in our strategy and how that's translated through in the way we've engaged employees and driven our innovation strategy as well. So now for ado, so on the topic of bringing corporate innovation to life and the risks behind, let's probably just go through what is, where do we start back in 2014, right? So yes, I co-founded Ingenius with one other guy, Kevin De Silva, and at that time, what you see here was the environment we were in. We saw there's a lot of talk around anchored agility. All right, so we were part of the IT supply chain organization, which is not necessarily where innovation in a corporate like Nestlé is normally discussed. Honestly, it just happened to be the place where a couple of people with similar mindsets, similar ambitions, and maybe innate need to solve some of the problems that we are facing through innovation, through technology, that we came together and brought Ingenius to life. But really, we're talking about here, this anchored agility. So on one hand, we talked about what we're hearing from Apple and talk about standardization and agility are not two different things that, and by consequence, innovation, they're not exclusive. And then you've got the other side, a lot of talk around bimodal capability, which at that point Ghana was pushing a lot. So how do you have these two ways a company should be working, particularly in their IT, as in the Ghana context, sort of emphasizing as very, very key. So you've got your core compliance, operations, IT driving the day-to-day transactional running of the business, and then how do you though innovate with technology alongside that, right? So bimodal, something that was very much talked about a lot, and we were trying to figure it out. We had this hypothesis, could our employees become great innovators, right? So, and you see there, I added it in terms of we're thinking, yes, could it become great innovators, but recognizing that we need to give them the right resources, the right environment, the team, potentially upskill them, but more importantly, tap into that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation that all employees have, right? So that's where we started off on one side, recognizing that we have to be more agile, we have to be more innovative, and we had to figure out a way to do that. And we believed our employees was the source of being able to make that happen, but under certain conditions. And we had an hypothesis for, well, could we actually bring the two together? So we came up with what ultimately, as Ingenius, covered 4 key principles of innovation, right? And this, I'm sure, wherever you are and you having experience in such in your own corporate innovation programs, are more or less the same, maybe with the exception of one. But here we talk about by users, for users. We felt that was where that intrinsic motivation lay. If our employees who wanted to solve problems for themselves using technology in their day-to-day, they were motivated to do so. And so it's about having solutions that IT solutions, digital solutions that for them would make their lives better at work, certainly, and by consequence would feed into the personal life as well. But of course, it has to have a business value. But we need to get there quickly in delivering a solution. Otherwise, the momentum will be lost and there'll be no interest to actually persevere and deliver on those innovations themselves. And finally, of course, getting direct funding for these kind of initiatives. Because if you don't, and you're having to fight via the normal portfolio processes to go and get the investment you need, when actually you're not very clear what the business value is, and there's a lot of uncertainty, be it the technology you're driving or being in terms of the how you're going to get there, then it would never be able to compete against all the other big projects and programs that were being put forward. So this is where we considered we need to figure it out, a program that covers these principles and that helps us to, on this road to anchored agility, leveraging our employees together. And ultimately what you see here was kind of a summary of what that was at the end. So we've got these three key components. On the right-hand side, you've got a fast-track innovation process where we broke down into the four key phases and elements within. So one being the garage, that's where we're going to have ideas being crowdsourced by our employees over a period of roughly 90 days or beyond. And we did actually end up running challenges that went even almost, it was 9 months, because we kept it open throughout the year so that employees could still submit ideas against more generic challenges whilst we were acting on within the bandwidth that we had on the ideas, which hopefully will lead to innovations in parallel during the year. We had the lab, which was saying, okay, taking the ideas that get selected throughout the process, then how do we apply design thinking and rapid prototyping and ultimately the kind of entrepreneurial pitching as a way to then, you see next, to actually get fundraising funding for the projects themselves. And that concept design phase, or the lab, for us was always geared up around these 2 months or 8 weeks. And then finally, the factory itself. So this is for the solutions that have been funded. Then how do we rapidly go ahead and build the minimum viable products that are compliant, at least as best as possible, that carry no risk to core operations, but then are there to very rapidly help us to validate, is there genuine interest and value in the solution itself, before then going over and scaling and industrializing, putting the big investments and the support process behind. And that was normally between 3 to 6 months of development work plus pilots. All supported by, to bring that process to life, 2 key elements. One being, of course, the team, where it consists of designers, product managers or equivalents of, and developers, all underpinned by a technology platform that helps us to crowdsource those ideas from the beginning, but then also help feed the communication in an efficient way across the process as well. Right, so not just purely for the crowdsourcing, but how can it also be our communication channel, what's going on with those projects as well. And this was an example, I took a screenshot, it's good to reflect back, of some of the projects that we had worked on at that time. So already within the first year of running, back in 2014, we have a couple of digital solutions there that, for those of you who may have SAP planning solutions, have top left alert cockpits, so very much ingrained in the helping our demand and supply planners to be more exceptional based in how they operate, so saving hours of work compared to them doing this manually themselves. So really a strong digital transformation project, and we leverage a lot of interesting new technology and really delved into kind of early stage APIs within our infrastructure at that point. Back in 2014. Second, InShelf was a mobile app for employees to help them tell our supply chain. So they've been the last mile ambassadors and saying, look, I see that this product is not on the shelf in this store when I expect it to be. And also from maybe a quality perspective, hey, this product isn't maybe as fresh as we expect it to be from our supply chain. And that could have been obviously for a whole host of reasons, but at least as a way to get that last mile data, which could be fed back into our processes. And then finally, the top there, ocean container tracker. So we ship a lot of products from one side of the world to the other. How can we better visually see what's coming, when it's going to arrive, and how do we manage that as the planning community? So, and then of course the drones at the bottom there, drones for warehouses. So much more typical now, but back there 7+ years ago, it was very much, and certainly even today in the environment of warehouses, great for inventory counting as a use case, but also has its own challenges as well. So this just gives a flavor of the kind of projects we worked on that came from employees and working with those employees actually in respective jobs where these tools, solutions were supporting them in delivering value for the Nestlé business. Now, if we move it forward now from 2014 to where are we today, there's of course a lot of parallels, but it's also massive minor evolution. So where we are today, we really position ourselves as actually increasing more of an ecosystem of innovation, both for employees and connecting and bridging talent internally and externally through our outposts, through the universities that we partner with, the startups, our big IT strategic vendors, and more so, as well as, of course, our employees at the bottom, but then everyone else in between, the strategic leaders and the managers in between, right? So it's about how do we this shared intelligence we can bring together, where you see we talk about accelerating business innovation, but by bridging that expertise and talent to do what? To deliver purposeful experiences for the employees, for our consumers, for our suppliers, and everyone in between. And you see again the parallel. We talk about what is Ingenius today. It still very much consists of a team of innovation managers, designers, to our growth hackers now, digital strategists, developers, and science thinking experts, coupled with a fast track process that gets us end to end from strategy right through to concept design, funding, and minimum viable product that actually can be used in real life consumer environment. Now, that consumer environment could be anyone in an employee in a factory in this context, or it could be actually an external consumer themselves. And of course, supported by an omni-channel crowdsourcing platform. So we've gone beyond simply just getting ideas from employees, but it's also how we have the multiple channels for those employees to engage together, but then also connect them with the rest of the ecosystem that we're continuously evolving and growing and shaping. And this is the impact we've had today, right? So looking across 7 years, so what started as running 1, 2, 3 challenges a year at most, with a challenge would normally come out with 2 or 3 projects. We really now shifted to working on in total 150 problems to date, the opportunities that we've crowdsourced ideas from. We now have not just one crowdsourcing channel, but we have 3 that we're leveraging with both internal tools and external, but all coming in centrally behind to a common platform that opens up new opportunities as well, right? Because if we have all these ideas and concepts sitting together in one place, that data and where they've come from gives us a lot of strength in identifying who and how we engage with our internal partners and external partners to actually convert those into value-driven solutions and what we bring to life and how we bring them to life. 9,000 ideas. And I was just checking actually already in the first 18 months of Ingenius back in 2014, we'd only got 450 ideas back then. Now we've gone well over 9,000. And only in the last 12 months, as part of this enormous growth, we've actually, that's 20% of all ideas have come through only in the last 12 months alone. When it comes to engaged employees, we are engaging and trending approximately 35-40% more engagement this year than we did last year, which was a record breaker last year, which was a record breaker the year before. So we're very much growing exponentially, and that's for many reasons we'll touch on in a second. But ultimately, we've now engaged in total of 7 years, 81,000 employees, provided access to 40 more plus 4 financing rounds, so that those projects could get financed directly from the business or from our IT leadership, where it's been digital solutions and so on. And then if I count all the projects that we've worked on or we have enabled through Ingenius in the last 7 years, we're well over 140. And I just tried to pick out some of the key milestones on our journey, which is goes there with. So basically, we started in supply chain IT, again, not the typical place for these kind of programs launching. And I myself was an IT consultant in supply chain at that time, before evolving to this role. Yes, we actually then jumped to non-IT solutions and realizing that our process and our technology, together actually, and the team of capabilities, even if we're IT people, but we had also this UX expertise, for example, allowed us to work on ideas or ultimately generate concepts with employees and with experts in R&D, for example, right, for food and beverage products as well. We then progressed a couple of years ahead, and we actually end up being taken out of supply chain IT into a global IT innovation team formed within IT, but was supporting digitally powered innovation with our strategic business units, with markets, as well as within IT itself and the business capabilities that the IT product teams and streams were responsible for delivering. We actually moved to Barcelona in 2019, where we're all based initially in headquarters in Vevey. I still stayed in Vevey, but then rebuilt a team in Barcelona, shifting from what before was very much a build of our digital solutions to a much more adopt and adapt, to innovate quickly, to get the validation quickly. That doesn't mean that everything was off the shelf is exactly the kind of ideas we're looking for. We recognize we could take something off the shelf here, and we could take something off the shelf here, and something off the shelf here, and bundle it together to drive a whole new value proposition, which we could test much quicker than if we tried to build it all ourselves. Again, primarily on the digital aspect in that case. And also which point that led to whole new service lines, recognizing that, and we still are very kind of an elitist program in many ways, right? 9,000 ideas with 140 plus projects are generated at the end of it. It's still, there's quite a gap still in that. So how can we make even more accessible, more challenges, more people? And we open up new service lines to enable crowdsourcing at even smaller scale, non-global propositions as well. We moved on to sustainability last year. That's ahead of, and what I mentioned earlier about our regeneration as being kind of a place where we articulate that. And most importantly now, if we talk about this year, as part of our huge growth, we actually we worked with Dawn Americas as an example, and we got in one challenge alone across 80,000 people based in the Americas. We engaged almost 10% of them within 4 weeks. And then we had 5 projects that came out of that, which, we're actually working on delivering 2 of them with those entrepreneurs in those markets and those business units. And so finally, in terms of what works and not.
Sorry, Nick, if I may interrupt.
Sure.
We will have to go a little bit faster because we should have some time for discussion as well. So yeah.
Sure. Well, we're actually here there in terms of the summary of what we found works and the challenges that we found in bringing that to life. But maybe see, you can read it on the screen yourself, and most of this but if I can just maybe pull out one from each side that's probably less spoken about, at least in forums, are the ones we typically all go to. One is about anticipatory mindset, right? And so whenever we work on a project, it's how do we pre-anticipate the challenges that project's going to bring? How do we pre-anticipate stakeholders that we need, the validations to actually bring that innovation to life. And that's where a key part of my team and our role is that bringing that thinking in and working with those experts to address those before they actually become a problem. We actually call them our pre-mortem, right? So what are the things that could go wrong, and how do we anticipate for all of these? Maybe just on the other side, in terms of the ongoing challenges we still have, as most do, is regarding the scale up and ownership of those minimum viable products. It is something we've been addressing in different ways, and it's still, though, not where I would personally like it to be, but definitely we've got solutions, and we're experimenting with different approaches in the next weeks and months continuously to get there. We're not, but we're confident. Over to you, Surab.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. I mean, I have talked to you before, and every time I'm totally floored. But I'm gonna start, Nick, with so we have a lot of questions in the questions tab, but I will start with something that I wanted to ask you. So you already covered a lot about the risk taking and how you navigate through it, but still, employee innovation itself was such a novel idea. Let's say 7 years back when you started, 8 years back. So this was a risky strategy. This was a risky business. How did you integrated this into the long-term business strategy of Nestle? One. The second part of this question is, once the employees enter the employee innovation, they have to be incentivized differently. They cannot have the same KPIs as before, because now they are doing something else as well. Was this taken into account at Nestle?
Yeah. So so the first one, in terms of how to make it part of the business strategy, I think we went in with this perception of, it's about bottom up employee innovation, and that meant we actually almost, because they didn't care whether anyone outside of course, our sponsors really bought into this. We want to make sure that the employees themselves, first and foremost, they're in the center. They're the ones who we have to please. If we have to try and find everyone else in between and have them buy into it, it's in a company as big as ours, we'd still be talking now and never got anything off the ground, right? So in terms of, it's become more and more part of Nestlé's business strategy at the market level and to get the zone level, as explained, certainly in IT, more implicitly and through just credibility of having proven itself, right? So we've proven that we can bring value of asking our employees to help us solve problems. We've proven that we could, with the right scoping, work on the types of ideas that can rapidly help us to validate propositions cheaply. And if there's a goal, there's the potential of, well, how do we bring this to life quicker by already taking a different way of looking at a problem and thinking differently, and connecting with experts around the world, something that normally everyone's very siloed, right? I'm very siloed in my own business, and maybe I know all my experts in my business. I know it's also in R&D and finance and marketing, but I don't necessarily know how to do that outside of my own organization. So I think those are the elements I would bring to mind. So the same part of your question was around, can you just reiterate?
I thank you, man. You kind of touched both of them at the same time.
Yep.
It's okay. Thank you, Nick. I mean, thank you for the honest answer. My second point I would like to touch upon is something you talked about, bridging external and internal innovation. So not all ideas can be incubated at Nestle, or not all ideas can somehow be, how do I say, made real at Nestle, and you go to startups for this. How do you make this bridge basically between the internal innovation that you're doing at Ingenius and the startups that are outside of Nestle?
Yep. So we've, for example, connected with incubators or accelerators like a Mash Challenge, maybe you're familiar with. And from one side, it's, so you go early in the journey, how do you identify what are the types of startups that could bring value in, right? And how do you connect the dots? So there being cases where myself and my team, we went to such places and we've seen some interesting startups, and we think, okay, how do we promote what they do? And by promoting what they do, then we're able to use that to inspire idea generation to solve problems which come up maybe a couple of weeks later, several months later, or maybe that kind of inspiration actually helped to actually generate the problem statement in its first place, right? So that's one side. And then if and when an opportunity came where we would end up working with a startup to help us either incubate the idea to actually very quickly get to a concept to validate it, or we've off ourselves, we've of course been scouting and looking in the marketplace and in designing the solution almost in isolation from a concept perspective, because we much more focused around what does the user experience need to be, and so what are the requirements ultimately, and then afterwards we go and hunt outside and see is there a fit with their startup providing something, or is there a startup that wants to co-innovate with us. And normally then that comes in later on after funding, where we do have firstly funding being cleared, signed off, we have some cash and we know exactly how much that is, and we know what we want to validate, and with that we are much more credible as well in approaching these startups and saying, okay, this is the scope of what we're looking for, can you deliver, and can you give us an answer quickly, and we respect that it may not be 100% your proposition, but is that where you want your solution to go? And if so, it is a match, then let's figure it out together. And the way we've done that with different startups in different scenarios, it's very mixed, but ultimately I believe it's a very much fundamentally the case of, I know what I know now, you know what you know in your respective field. Do we think there's a match here that we want to try this out together? And no one's going to be fired, and worst case you only get 25,000 out of it, and you don't get any more business because Nestlé choose not to invest. That's okay. So, and at the end, trust and respect is the key thing we're trying out together.
I should definitely send you an invitation for the Hello Tomorrow Global Summit. I mean, Hello Tomorrow has one of the biggest deep tech ecosystems in Europe. We have like 6 to 7,000 of startups with us, but all in deep tech. This brings me to my next question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So did you? It started from IT, and it Ingenius basically spread it through all the other departments at Nestlé, including R&D. And last time we were talking, you were talking a little bit about how a lot of deep tech startups or initiatives have come out of these things. What are these initiatives, and what is the bigger impact of these initiatives at the corporate level in Nestlé?
Sure. So the example of relation with R&D, where you saw that in 2015, where we ventured outside of supply chain IT, and as a great visionary HR lead in R&D, and that's where it came from. It's at the end, we do have incredible resources in people and technology, obviously very much best in class and leading in the FMCG industry. But the question came from HR saying, what can we do to engage the breadth of all employees in HR, in R&D, more so in the innovation process. And innovation isn't necessarily only in products, in our case, food and beverage solutions. It's also about how it's a thinking, it's skills, right, that we need to bring about. So how can we do that? And how can we help people to understand and to connect more so and drive value, and even maybe through digital solutions in the case of R&D, like any other organization as well, to better drive value. And so that's actually where we started off. And that ultimately led to building more trust and increased relationship with R&D to what you see today. If you go to ingeniusnestlé.com, some of the challenges that we've been running, you can't see the ideas, of course, unless you're a Nestlé employee, but as you can see the kind of challenges which we really we're exposing to our employees, and even in some cases externally as well. So when it comes to product innovation, of food and beverage product innovation, that increasingly is showing the value of tapping into a workforce of 300,000 or so employees to help us get there.
We also talked about like bio buildings and some of these initiatives that were managing the SDGs, UN SDG goals, basically sustainability goals.
Yes. So absolutely. So, and then a couple example projects that we spoke about in before was bio buildings as as an example. It's a solution there which actually is having microalgae bioreactors in our buildings. It's something that's come out of universities, and I've seen in some universities in Holland as well. That's of course taking CO2 as the microalgae grows. We could potentially use that microalgae for packaging or even potentially in food products. All this is still early stage to explore, but it just shows potential of you're coming from one angle to actually reduce our CO2 footprint, making our buildings more efficient. Oh, and by the way, it's a possibility that this technology also can drive, into our core business, some new innovations. So, and I think that's again where Ingenius and really helps to bridge a gap between the different parts of the company, and it maybe individually did not focus on these areas, but actually when you combine all their objectives together, potentially you do have something what's so obvious to everyone we should be doing this, but nobody would have taken such initiative by themselves forward. So yes, biobuildings as a project that we're just experimenting with at the moment it's a great use case to show that that's bringing people together across the company in this way. It gives whole new set of opportunities that nobody individually would have considered at all.
Thank you, Nick. I mean, great answer. But I'm gonna take a question which was on the similar lines. Sorry. Okay. So, is there an opportunity for SMBs or startups to leverage these IT solutions in the supply chain management outside Nestlé?
I see, probably referring to the old examples of the solutions that I showed from back from 2014. So I'm guessing that's where Devesh was coming from. Those solutions themselves, no, they're in actually it's a kind of they're on our premise or connected to our systems. It was admittedly part of the thinking at the time when we developed them. Could they be resold? But that's of course not our core business, or not even Nestlé IT's core business to do. But potentially for those kind of solutions, working with our partners, yes, it's something we did explore. But could they sell them, resell them, opportunities? And it was something that was definitely thought about, but we didn't actually bring to life.
I hope this answers your question, Devish. Then we have a question from Michael, sorry. With the crowdsourcing channels, what incentives, recognition, involvement do you award to those who submit ideas? Oh, this is a good question. Do they only submit ideas, or do they also have the chance to work on them?
So they absolutely have the chance to work on them. Now we've got 2 or 3 sets of services I now provide. I mentioned to you that I started in 2019. So before Ingenius was kind of one size fits all, we would work with a community, for example, R&D, and work with them to define a problem statement to collect ideas from the crowd, primarily R&D people, but of course was open to anyone in Nestlé to submit their ideas. We would consistently then, in that one size fits all, choose 3 to 5 ideas, incubate them from 8 weeks, have them presented to those community executives. So like our CTO as an example, and his Mancom, to decide if they want to fund them. And then depending on the nature of the solution, actually Ingenius would be the one to deliver it, or it would go into the standard pipeline of respectfully, of that community or that entity, a product technology center, or a market, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we used to do. And in that case, that scenario, yes, employees would definitely be involved beyond simply submitting an idea, but also in bringing that idea to life. And we would connect them with experts and with potential consumers throughout that process. And in only 8 weeks, they learn an incredible amount. It's thrown deep in the water to do so, but we recognize they've still got a day job to do, right? So we don't take them out of the day job. They keep doing that, of course, with the approval of their line manager, that they would ultimately reduce the amount of time they spend over those 2 months in their day job, being backfilled somehow, so that they can actually work on helping develop this concept. And my team, where we've got the real skin in the game as well, is the partner or the co-idea owner, as you may, to actually bring those concepts to life. So we've got expertise, and it's on us, we're the accountable ones to make sure that they, both the entrepreneur and their concept, are of a stage that can be pitched, and they pitch to those executives to actually get funding, which hopefully, if they do, they can potentially generate them. Now, more so, we're getting also a lot of challenges, which are just saying, please help me with ideas. We'll take it through a normal pipeline. And if the circumstances work, then it can also work on the idea owners can work on those as well. So now we've got more of a mix than what we used to. But the self-recognition piece and is that you are building yourself, you building new capabilities, you actually are realizing the solution, you're helping bring your idea to life. That surprisingly it was surprising, to be honest, to many people, myself included initially, just how much of that intrinsic motivation there really was. So done properly with the right exposure, with them recognizing that they have grown and developed along this journey, and they've got a solution out of it, even if they didn't get the funding, but they've got a concept that's been validated. That's huge, and that's huge for most people. So we find that in most cases these are good enough incentives for people to want to keep on coming back. Of course, in some markets you also do give them more, but let's say for the vast majority of people that have gone through Ingenius challenges, this is what is at least the standard.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I will take this question from Sander, and then I have one question to ask from myself. So what is the high over distribution of build DIY versus buy versus partner in your company, and has changed over the years due to the success of Ingenius?
In the company as a whole, I think I'll argue as within the IT organization, which I'm still part of, but you see it shows it's irrelevant, right? As I said, we're helping the rest of the business in many ways. We're enabling the innovation. We don't see, yes, we're innovators ourselves, but we are enablers of innovation, of business innovation. Ultimately, that's always the anchor that we should stick to. So business innovation, leveraging technology, either through the crowdsourcing to start with, or through the way rapidly we get to validating the concepts and bringing those to life, potentially, through digital tools. That's the first thing to always consider. And that, as a company, we've shifted a lot over the years, as most have, like ours, going away from build to adopt, maybe adapt if needed, and versus build itself. And has that been part of the success of Ingenius? Yes, there's technology also has evolved a lot of reasons why we were building ourselves initially, these solutions. And I was a position that I was understanding the core IT solutions in Nestlé, and I was able to understand and learn quickly about these new technologies, and then try and figure out how we bring these together with other experts around me. The reality is that just takes too long. It takes too long from a compliance perspective. It takes too long from a development perspective. And in the end, it's not a core solution that typically the company is going to hold on to, or as an organization we should hold on to. Then you've got the problem of the ownership afterwards, which is going to affect you from a scale up, which is going to affect the amount of actual value, business value, and return on investment that you're able to generate. So first and foremost, trying to go quicker. The speed is the primary driver. We can do that quicker, taking products off the shelf. And if it works, and then if at the end you figure out, well, really, what is the delta, right? Where is the value not being sufficiently generated by the off-the-shelf products? Then you address that, and then you can figure out with that partner, be it a startup or be it a big IT vendor, how do you close that? And you do your math, and then that helps to make the decision for you. So yeah, that's how we've changed over the years, in my viewpoint.
Thank you, Nick. We had another question in the audience, but it's already answered in your last answer as well. So I'm gonna ask a cliche one, basically. So could employees become innovators? That's the idea behind Ingenius. And then you facilitate them, you give them training, and they basically go from becoming employees to innovators to entrepreneurs. Is there a risk that these employees, after gaining a significant amount of skills that Nestlé is providing them, leave Nestlé? And if it is, how are you circumventing it?
Yep. Fantastic question. And yes, of course, it's absolutely possible. And yes, it does happen. It already happened in the early stages of Ingenius. Some of the great entrepreneurs that we had left. Well, first of all, many got promoted, which is great. But still, the ones that didn't, and some of those they still get promoted, and years later chose to go and do something themselves. So it does happen. And my perspective of this is just like any leader in a company is, look, we've got a job to do to deliver value to our consumers, and if we really believe in the mental what that company is meant to be providing, we've got to have our employees believe in that too. And the way you do that is engage them as much as possible, and you make your belief, your purpose, their purpose as well. Now, if over time there's a mismatch happens, and for whatever reason those employees, however talented it may be or as much invested they were, or less so, and they find or seek opportunities outside, good for them. At the end, I know my generation probably still stays more with one company than bouncing around so frequently. But at the same time, I believe we should always do our best to give as much talent, skills, and build up that talent to drive as much value as with that during that time that those people are with us. Of course, we want them to be with us as long as possible, but that isn't necessarily the best thing for them or for us. But that should not take us away as leaders from still bringing inspiration, still increasing their capabilities, and ultimately, we're humans at the end of the day, and we just want everyone to prosper in more ways than one, right?
Thank you, Nick. For me, the takeaway would be make their priorities your priority. But thank you, Nick, for this amazing, amazing session. With this, we will close the session. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And Nick, we will have a YouTube link of this series. For anybody who is here, they can rewatch it on the YouTube. And Nick, I will send you a link personally. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye
sir.
bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.